Hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome to the channel. At UFC 294, Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski 2. We saw some atrocious performances, and I'm going to give you my opinion on who deserves to be cut by the UFC after their performance at UFC 294. I'm going to start with some honorable mentions, then I'm going to get into my actual list, saving last on the list for who most deserves to be cut after their performance at UFC 294. And I'm telling you this right now. I want the number one on this list cut so badly and fired so badly, and you're never going to guess who it is. But let's start off with the first honorable mention. We have Muin Gafurov. Muin Gafurov opened up the pay-per-view main card against Said Nurmagomedov, gets choked out via guillotine in the first minute, a little over a minute, I think the submission happened in. And I want to give him a break. That's why I put him as an honorable mention, because he only has 2 fights in the UFC. He's 0-2. He made a short notice replacement fight against John Castaneda, lost that fight. Then he gets Said Nurmagomedov. Said Nurmagomedov is a top 15 bantamweight in my opinion. I think he got robbed against Jonathan Martinez, or arguably robbed. It was a close fight. And I think the UFC just wanted to set Said Nurmagomedov up to get a win, and that's why they gave him Muin Gafurov. So, you know what I mean? This was a very tough test, especially in your second fight in the UFC. You're essentially fighting a top 15 talent because the bantamweight division is so deep. You look how deep the bantamweight division is. There's guys who are outside the top 15 who are absolute savages. I've said this time and time again. There is guys outside the top 15 in the bantamweight division that if they were in any other division and as skilled as they are, they would most likely be in the top 15 or even the top 10. So we're going to give him one more chance just because he took such a tough fight against Said Nurmagomedov, but if he loses his next fight, he definitely deserves to be cut from the UFC. Moving on to my next honorable mention, we have Muhammad Yahya. Muhammad Yahya took on Trevor Peek at UFC 294, and I don't think Trevor Peek's all that good. I like watching him. He's an exciting fighter, but Muhammad Yahya looked horrible. I mean, he looked like he was tired the entire fight. He just looked like he didn't want to be there the entire fight. The body language was horrific. And I just don't know if he belongs in the UFC. I thought he was going to beat Trevor Peek. I thought he was a decent fighter. He was fighting in 5-round fights outside the UFC. He's 12-4. And he comes in, he loses to literally the bottom of the barrel Trevor Peek. I know we all like Trevor Peek, and he's fun to watch, and he goes out there and fights like $250, and the funnel cake is on the line at the Kentucky State Fair. But at the same time, we know Trevor Peek isn't that good. We know Trevor Peek's never going to be a legit contender. Muhammad Yahya didn't look good. He couldn't stuff takedowns in this fight. I mean, he did stuff some, but he got taken down by Trevor Peek. He was getting outstruck by Trevor Peek, and there was no sense of urgency to even try to win the fight from Muhammad Yahya. So, maybe one more fight because this was his UFC debut. But you look at some of the opponents he fought before this. 5-3, 7-4. Not the best of opponents. And the way he looked against Trevor Peek, and the fact that that's in the lightweight division. That's in the lightweight division. I mean, seriously. He didn't even look like a lightweight to begin with. So I think he's an honorable mention. But one more fight. If he loses, he needs to be cut from the organization. Moving up on my list of honorable mentions. Next up, and I hate to throw this one on there, but that is Anshu Jubli. He's an honorable mention. He gets finished in the 3rd round against Mike Breeden. If you lose to Mike Breeden and you get finished by Mike Breeden, you're probably going to end up on a cuts list. I think Jubli is very talented, and that's why he's an honorable mention. And he was winning the fight, but the fact that Mike Breeden is walking you down and you're just doing nothing. I don't know if he was gassed, if he was petrified. I don't know what was going on with Anshu Jubli. It's just in that 3rd round, he just could not believe that Mike Breeden was walking him down. So the fact that you're getting finished in the 3rd round by Mike Breeden, who was on the verge of getting cut by the UFC himself, probably shouldn't even got this opportunity to have another fight in the UFC, and he walks you down and finishes you in the 3rd round. It's just not a good look at all. I think Anshu Jubli, he's looked very promising with his grappling, with his striking, even looked good early on in this fight, but he has a lot to evolve on and a lot to level up and grow in terms of his skill set, because if you're getting finished by Mike Breeden, that's not a good look for the future. And the fact that he's embarrassing you by walking you down, barking at you, talking, and you're just not throwing. You're just not throwing. And he didn't seem like he seemed tired, but he didn't seem completely gassed, because at some points after Breeden kind of stopped doing that, he was kind of throwing back a little bit. It's like he was petrified because Mike Breeden's walking him down. And that's, I mean, if that isn't worthy of an honorable mention, I don't know what is. Moving up on my list to my next honorable mention and my last honorable mention, and that is whoever was sounding the horn. They can't get a proper air horn. The UFC was self-regulating for this fight card They can't get the man a proper horn. I mean, I remember the event. I don't remember which event it was. There was like a car horn, it sounded like. Now we got a broken air horn to end the round, every single round. And that guy didn't think, oh, you know what? In between fights, when the UFC's wasting 45 minutes in between quick finishes, let me run to the store down the street. Let me grab a proper air horn. Cut that guy immediately, fire him immediately. And he didn't test it beforehand. I feel like if I got my hands on an air horn right now, I'm going to be sounding it off. So the fact that you're not testing your air horn prior, the fact that the UFC's hiring a person, literally their only job, sit cage side, and when the timer runs out, honk a horn. And you literally can't do that. You literally can't do that. I mean, talk about a level of incompetence that I have never seen before. Whoever that guy is, fire him immediately. Moving on to my actual list, starting off with Abu Azaitar. Abu Azaitar lost to Cedriquez Dumas. And, Cedriquez Dumas isn't even that good. And Abu Azaitar, I arguably thought he won this fight, but I'm not going to cry about it. I don't think it was a robbery by any means. And the fact that you look back, he has not won a fight since 2018. Abu Azaitar has not won a fight since 2018, July of 2018. It has been over 5 years since Abu Azaitar has won a fight. He's only on a 2-fight losing streak. Fair enough. He's been out. He's been injured. But if you haven't won a fight since 2018, like what does he talk about when people ask him, oh, what do you do for a living? Oh, well, I fight. Oh, when's the last? Let me see a fight where you win. Oh, well, that was 5 years ago. If he's bragging about that, imagine he's bragging about, yeah, I got a win in the UFC back in July of 2018. I mean, talk about an Uncle Rico moment from Abu Azaitar if he's doing that. And now he's on a 2-fight losing streak, got finished by Marc-Andre Barriault in his last fight before this, and then he loses to Cedriquez Dumas, gets out-grappled. And then the second and third round, honestly, I thought you could argue that Azaitar won the second and third round, but he's getting up there in age. He's 37 years old, going on 38. His overall record's 14-4. I just don't, and he looks like a light heavyweight. How is he even fighting at middleweight? He looks like a light heavyweight. I just think if you're losing to Cedriquez Dumas, I think it's probably time to hang it up. 2-fight losing streak, out for 5 years essentially, or not winless in 5 years. And, you don't even look good against Cedriquez Dumas. I mean, if you're ever going to look good, it's going to be against Cedriquez Dumas, who can't even finish Cody Brundage. So I think you need to cut Abu Azaitar. Moving up on the list, and I hate to do this because I actually like this fighter quite a bit, and that is Bruno Silva. Bruno Silva lost to Sharabutin Magomedov. And honestly, it's not necessarily that he lost, because even though Bruno Silva has lost 4 out of his last 5, I still like him as a measuring stick of up-and-coming contenders in the middleweight division, but it's the way he fought. He would look for takedowns, and then he would lay in guard, literally not trying to do anything. Literally not trying to do anything. It's like, I don't want to fight at all. Let me just take you down and lay in your guard. He was literally losing while he's laying on top of Magomedov. Magomedov won the second and third round by elbowing from the bottom. You know how rare that is? The only time I really remember that happening is Tony Ferguson versus Danny Castillo from years and years ago, where he won a fight from elbowing from the bottom. If Bruno Silva did some damage in the second and third round, Bruno Silva could win 29-28. But instead, he loses 30-27 to Sharabutin Magomedov, who had a lot of hype behind him. And don't get me wrong, his striking was excellent. He was lighting Bruno Silva up on the feet. But still, to go out there, to get a takedown because you're losing on the feet and then do absolutely nothing. He didn't even attempt to throw ground and pound. And even when he kind of postured up and then stood up and Sharabutin was laying on his back, instead of throwing ground and pound, he's getting hit with head kicks. Sharabutin was landing head kicks off of his back. That's all you need to know. And then you factor in the fact that Bruno Silva is 1-4 in his last 5 fights. Lost to Magomedov. Got finished by Brendan Allen. Had a win over Brad Tavares. Okay, solid win. Before that, gets finished by Gerald Meerschaert. Before that, loses to Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira fight was competitive too. I mean, think about how crazy that is. Think about how crazy the downslope of Bruno Silva is. He's 34 years old. I don't want to see him take any more damage, to be quite honest. He took a lot of damage against Sharabutin Magomedov. I think it's time for him to be cut. He doesn't have the will to fight. He wants to take guys down, lay on them. And if I remember correctly, I almost think he was kind of questioning the decision, if I'm not mistaken on that. I might be mistaken. But you can't win fights by just taking guys down and literally laying on them, doing nothing. Literally no damage, not throwing any shots. Meanwhile, you're getting butchered with elbows from the bottom. So I think it's time for Bruno Silva to get cut from the organization. Moving up on my list, we have Jinh Yu Frey. Jinh Yu Frey lost to Victoria Dudikova, and she just looked like garbage. And honestly, I'd cut them both. This was a horrible fight. Why didn't this open up the card? Why was this the second fight on the card? It doesn't make any sense. Should have opened up the card. Horrible performance. And the fact that, this is all I need to tell you, her record is 11-10. 11-10. 11 wins, 10 losses. Yes, you heard that correct. What is she doing in the UFC? And the fact that she's basically on the verge of getting cut. She should have already been cut. She's 38 years old. This is her career, and there's no sense of urgency. Victoria Dudikova didn't even look good in this fight. She didn't even look good, and there was no sense of urgency from Jinyu Fry. 38 years old, 11-10. She's on a 4-fight losing streak. She's on a 4-fight losing streak. Listen to some of the names she's losing to. Victoria Dudikova, okay, Victoria Dudikova, upcoming prospect, whatever, 7-0, undefeated. Before that, Elise Reed. Before that, Polyana Viana got absolutely starched by Polyana Viana. Before that, Vanessa Demopoulos. I mean, that's crazy. You have to go back to 2021 to find her a win, but to be 0-4 in your last 4, that's a bad look. 38 years old, no sense of urgency, not exciting, not elite anywhere, not even fun to watch. It's time for Jinyu Fry to find a new career. I can't watch her fight anymore. I really can't. I can't suffer through her on another prelim. I really don't want to watch Jinyu Fry ever fight again. I don't know. Like, she has these huge, massive arms. She looks like she's bodybuilding or taking steroids or something. And she doesn't even use them. Like, she can't grapple. She can't strike. She threw a couple decent ground and pound shots, I think, in the second round. But outside of that, there was no bright spots for her. And Victoria Dudikova wasn't doing much herself. So it's just crazy to me that she's still sticking around. 11-10 record, which is just one of the worst. Is there a worse record in the UFC? Somebody let me know down in the comments. I don't know if there's a worse record currently in the UFC. And I'm not talking about UFC record. I'm just talking about a fighter with a pro MMA record as bad as 11-10. That's a horrific record. Cut Jinyu Fry immediately. Moving up on my list to my second to last cut. And I'm sure you guys could probably guess this one and think it was number 1. But that is the doctor from UFC 294. This guy had no idea what he was doing. And Dana White's like, oh, the guy's inexperienced and blah, blah, blah. This guy is literally single-handedly ruining fights. And also completely unprofessional. You go in the cage when Victor Henry takes a groin shot, supposedly, from Javid Bashrat. Now, the performance that you had Victor Henry putting on had me very suspicious of him, and I'm still very suspicious of him. But you're the doctor, okay? You're supposed to walk in and check on the fighter, ask him what's going on. He literally walks in and says, Victor Henry, well, I don't think it hit you in the balls. I don't think it hit you in the balls. He's supposed to be checking on the fighter. He should have been like, oh, well, what's going on? What exactly hurts? What are you feeling right now? He should have asked him simple questions. He should have let him recover, asked him more questions. He should have waved it off immediately. I mean, if he goes in there and checks on the guy and the guy's really writhing in agony, whether you believe him or not, it's your job to protect the fighters. And instead he's like, you know what, dude? Joe Rogan just texted me. He's back at home. He didn't make it out for this card, but he just texted me. He said he doesn't think the point of impact touched your balls at all. So I'm going to need you to get up and stop being such a bitch. That's essentially what the doctor said. That's essentially what he said. Then, this one really drives me nuts. You have the Johnny Walker Magomed Ankalaev fight. The doctor walks in for that one. Johnny Walker takes an illegal knee. Johnny Walker's immediately fine. I'm like, okay, there's no problem with this. Never gonna end up getting stopped. I had no inclination that this fight was gonna get stopped. He goes in there, talks to Johnny Walker, and then he tells the ref, oh, he's not fit to continue. Keep in mind, even when I went back and rewatched this sequence, even when the ref waved it off, Johnny Walker didn't realize what was going on. Now, maybe Johnny Walker was crazy concussed from that. Maybe he was. Maybe I'm completely wrong. But Johnny Walker doesn't speak English. You know, he has some basic English, but for the most part, he needs a translator. He doesn't even know what you're saying. And then you're asking, oh, what country are you in? I would have said Abu Dhabi, so I would have been wrong. It's United Arab Emirates. I would have never said that. I would have never thought that. Apparently, Johnny Walker said he's in the desert. The guy just waves it off. He doesn't even give him any more time. The referee's inexperienced because the referee should have told the doctor, well, let's give him a minute to calm down. We're in a stressful environment. The fight's going on. He just got kneed. The fight, the adrenaline's pumping. He's probably not thinking. He's just thinking, I want to get back in there. He's saying he's fine. Let's just wait a minute and then let's reevaluate. I don't understand. Like, because he answered a geographical quiz wrong. All of a sudden it's done. It's done. He doesn't look hurt. He doesn't have a cut. He doesn't this doctor's horrible. This doctor, thank God he wasn't needed for anything else. I mean, imagine going to him for medical advice. Like, imagine going to him for treatment. Imagine you break a bone in the octagon. He's the one overseeing you getting transferred to the hospital. And Dana White, oh, this guy's inexperienced. Well, guess what? The UFC self-regulated at UFC 294, which means they hired the judges, the refs, and the doctors. So that's on the UFC for that. They hired a horrible doctor who didn't know what he was doing. Dana White probably picked out the cheapest one. He's like, you know what? Oh, he's only $50 for the night. We'll take him. because we don't really need him. We don't really care about all that much. But this doctor needs to be fired immediately. I never want to see him working another UFC event again. And wherever he's licensed as a medical professional, have his license revoked immediately. That's how bad this was. Bare minimum, more training for him. I don't trust him to even diagnose a common cold. Moving on to my last cut on the list, and the one I feel so adamant about, and that is the MMA media. And this could be on the list every single week, but I really wanted to put this one on the list this week. They ask no substantial questions ever to Dana White. All they do is just, oh, how's Power Slap doing in India? Now, obviously, I'm exaggerating a bit, but you have Dana White a couple weeks ago, okay? He talked about the flag ban. There was a flag ban for the last year or so within the UFC. Fighters couldn't walk out with the flag. Dana White brought the flags back, and the way he talked about it, he acted like the media and the fans made him ban flags. He's the one that banned the flags, and then he comes out and kind of talking at the presser. This is a couple weeks ago. He says, yeah, I don't care about that anymore. If a flag hurts your feelings, oh well, boo-hoo. And he acts like the fans asked for it. He acts like the media advocated for a flag ban. No, they didn't. Nobody did. Dana White and whoever he talks to behind the scenes decided on a flag ban. He goes on this diatribe about it. Oh, if it hurts your feeling, blah, blah, blah. I don't personally care one way or another. Then now, 2 weeks later, obviously circumstances have changed, with other wars going on over in the Middle East, and they ban flags again. They ban flags again, and all the fighters are complaining about it. They're like, oh, we can't carry out our flags. You have Makhachev complaining about it. You have Basharat complaining about it. You have these fighters who've now been told they can carry flags out. The MMA media shows up to the post-fight presser. They don't ask Dana White about it because guess what? They're scared of Dana White. And I understand these people are worried about getting blacklisted by the UFC. But, how do you call yourself a media member? The majority of the MMA media is glorified publicists. All they do is take words from fighters and Dana White, and then they just regurgitate it. There's no actual reporting. There's no actual confirming any information. No matter what the UFC says, they just regurgitate it in the headlines. They didn't even bother asking him that. They didn't say, so what's up with the flag ban? Because they were scared of Dana. Dana was going to scold them. Dana was going to give them a dirty look. Dana was going to say, don't ask me about that. I'd rather talk about Power Slap. It's doing great in India. You would be surprised at these numbers in India for Power Slap. That's all they care about is staying on the UFC's good side and Dana White's good side. That's all they care about. They're not journalists. They're not media members. They're literally glorified publicists for the UFC. That's all they do for a living. That's what they do. They regurgitate whatever the UFC wants to say, what the UFC wants you to hear, really, and they just don't ask any decent questions. Listen to them when they go to press conferences. Like, oh, how do you feel about being back in Abu Dhabi? Oh, how you feel about the heat? How's the weather treating you? What do you think of the fans? Like listen to these questions. I mean, literally a fifth grader could write these questions. The MMA media is in such disarray. It's an embarrassment. None of these people will ever call out the UFC for anything. And the only people that do usually only do it because now they hate the UFC for whatever reason. And now they want to call out the UFC. So they don't even have any credibility because they were on the UFC's payroll before. Now they're not. Now they're criticizing the UFC. So they've been banned by the UFC or whatever. Now they're criticizing them. So the MMA media as a whole is just disgusting. It's embarrassing. I would say 99% of it, you cannot trust the MMA media. All they do is regurgitate talking points from Dana White and ask dumb questions at press conferences and never ask the questions we want to hear because they're too scared that Dana White's going to treat them mean and Dana White might ban them. Well, then get another job. Ask a decent question for once. And they should have asked about the flag ban. I was curious what Dana would have said, but I had a feeling, I had a sneaking suspicion, oh, they're not going to ask Daddy Dana about that. Oh, Kevin Iole, he's not there, but if he was there, he'd just be squirming on Dana's lap like he has been for the last, 10 years. It's an embarrassing state of media, and that's why I think every single media member needs to be fired. Every single one of them doesn't need to cover the sport anymore because they don't even actually cover the sport. They just regurgitate talking points from Dana White and whatever the UFC wants you to hear. That's all they do. Now, again, I've said this many times in earlier videos. I'm not actually advocating for anyone to lose their jobs or be cut. I have no effect on what actually happens with certain fighters, but performances like this have to be called out. The MMA media has to be called out. It's honestly an inspiration for my channel, why I started it, because of how bad the MMA media is. I'm not saying I'm doing that much better, but I'll talk about, I don't care what the UFC thinks. I don't care what anyone thinks. I'll continue to talk about what I feel like is important. And this is who I think needs to be cut. As far as who's actually going to be cut, the doctor's definitely going to be fired for sure. MMA media, Dana White loves what they did. They did a phenomenal job asking him about Power Slap. Jin Yu Fry, definitely being cut. Bruno Silva, Probably they'll keep him around. Abu Azaitar probably cut. And I don't think any of the honorable mentions are actually going to be cut. If there is, it'll probably be Muin Gafarov on a 2-fight losing streak. But let me know what you guys think of this list down in the comments. Did I miss anyone? Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And thank you so much for watching.